Hello, I'm Natalie Pantaleo. Welcome back to my podcast, the Inside Out Podcast. I'm here with my friend, local author and historian, Jim Murphy. Jim's the author of Real Philly History Real Fast, which is fascinating. He's got so many stories to tell us. And welcome, Jim, to the podcast and to the kitchen for the kitchen chat. Jim and I go back a little further than the book. He has a history in our career in copywriting and feature writing for ad agencies. We worked together for Franklin Mint Federal Credit Union, where we were creating and launching a magazine to our membership. And I'll never forget this, Jim, and I didn't even realize your love of history at the time. I think I may have mentioned this to you before. You wrote a story about, we had Ben Franklin at an event, because it was the Franklin.
Yeah, I remember.
It was the, I'm sorry.
It was Ben Franklin impersonator.
Right. Ben Franklin impersonator, thank you. But anyway, I remember when the story came back, I loved it, because you started with the sound that the men made on the ships, what they would have made. It was a reenactment in this like 1700s with hee, ho. Anyway, so how did you get so interested in history and start to do this, what you're doing now?
I think I was always interested in history. I was not a history major, but when I was at LaSalle, had to do a special paper for a senior paper, and the instructor said, you'll never be able to get an A if you're going to do it on the subject you wanted, which was Pennsylvania's role in the Civil War. And I said, well, I'm going to do it anyway. I got an A plus, and then the last day of school, he said, you never turned in a paper. I said, well, yeah, I did. You gave me an A plus. He said, well, you have to give it back. I did, and I never got it back. But I enjoyed the research so much, and I just started doing it again.
Wow.
And when I moved to Philadelphia in 2008, it was a natural. Every day I walk outside, I see something new and different. Like I see the Liberty One over
out
there.
the window there,
the first
right?
building to pass William Penn.
Yes, yes.
One of my favorite buildings.
Yeah, so I did, my viewers may have heard me mention this on a few of the podcasts, that myself and Michael Cotto, another Philly author, brought 4 Philadelphia books to the stage at Theater Exile a couple years ago for a production, and the authors took the stage, read a little bit from their book to launch a scene from local actors. So Jim was one of our, not only one of our authors, but he also had like little acting role there on stage too. It was super fun to do that. But I learned so much about your book during that time, and so much more about Philly. I thought I knew a lot about Philly. No, didn't even scratch the surface.
Well, I learn every day. I've put out 50 blogs since my book came out, 50 or 60, and I do something new every day, and I just love doing it.
Yeah. One of the things that was so intriguing to me about your book, and I think this is also on your website, which, by the way, what is your website? I'll put it in the description as well. But
realphillyhistory.com.
Yes, and I learned about this holy experiment that Philadelphia was. So can you tell us a little bit about that? To me, that was so interesting. I had never heard that before.
Sure. Well, William Penn went to jail about 8 times in London because he was a Quaker. And he got tired of that. And either the King Charles II, gave him Pennsylvania, 45,000 square miles, or because the Quakers were such a pain to the king, he said, here, let me send them all over to Pennsylvania, get them out of here. William Penn said, come to my city or my state and Commonwealth, and you can practice any religion you want. You can't hold office if you don't believe in Jesus Christ. But you can practice any religion, there will be no problems. And by 1790, a Frenchman said there were 33 different churches in Philadelphia. So that's a legacy that William Penn left us.
Right, and the Quakers are so peaceful. How could they be a pain to anybody?
They aren't, and they were difficult, I think, to rule.
Yeah, but they did take a stand on issues that were, for the betterment of human beings, I would say.
But let me tell you, there is a quote from the Swedes, and they say, and it was about the Quakers, for here there are, what do you call it? Here there are fanatics without number. Because there is freedom of conscience, there is freedom of belief, and I think it's speech. In other words, they're going to tell you, and Philadelphians tell you what they think.
That's true. They still do.
So that's a different side of the Quakers.
This is about your book today, but I attended one Quaker service for someone that had passed away. And in the congregation, people could just get up and speak when they're moved to speak, speaking of this. And one woman, she didn't like the guy that passed away, and she got up and said it. She said, listen, I didn't like him at all, but I'm here for his family. So I guess that free speech is dyed in the wool here, right?
Well, I went to a Quaker wedding and a Quaker funeral, and they were almost exactly the same.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, same thing. You walk in, you sit down, the Spirit of God moves you, someone talks, then there may be dead time, then someone else talks. When the hour is up, they say thank you and leave, and it was the same ceremony.
That's right. But they've had such influence on the city of Philadelphia, and I'm sure that there's so many more stories, you know, about the Quaker influence. You do a lot of things at the Old Swedes Museum and Church, right?
At Gloria Dei
Gloria
Church.
Dei.
I'm on their board, their preservation, historic preservation of Gloria Dei, I think is the title, board.
Yeah.
So, and there's some really good people with doing historical things there in the graveyard and cleaning the graves. So it's been fun.
Yeah. I wanted to also ask you, Jim, like I had heard a rumor not too long ago that there was some kind of underground city under 30th Street. In your research and knowledge of the city and history, have you come across anything about that, or do you have any mention of it on your website?
I don't. The only thing in fact, I talked to John Weber recently. John Weber and I have been doing Philly Fun Facts on WHYY. He's been doing them for 2 years. 30th Street is his favorite place because they have their own morgue and they have their own heliport, which I didn't know. But I know that there were burial grounds near there, and that's probably why the talk about the underground city. In Philadelphia, if you dig somewhere, you're likely to hit a body because we had bodies everywhere. We had graveyards everywhere. So I believe there was a Quaker graveyard over there, but I don't remember the details right now.
So I guess they have to have a morgue. I guess the airport must have a morgue.
Probably. I
Because if
just
people
never thought
die,
about it. Yeah.
While they're there, they have to. They wouldn't take them to the city morgue, or.
I mean, maybe they hold it and then move them. I'm not sure, but I had no idea.
That'd be a great tour. Can we tour the morgue?
It's probably a dead tour.
So, you know, one of the other things that I have a million questions. I love these tidbits of history and knowledge, and sometimes when you may be talking about them or sharing them third hand with someone else, I might get the facts wrong, but Jim gets the facts correctly. I wanted to ask about Lazaretto because a while back I forget what event it was for my daughter that we were looking for a banquet facility. And I was standing there thinking, God, this has so much history, but it wasn't until I read your book that I realized that all there was behind it, and you liken it a little bit to a precursor to Ellis Island.
That's what David Barnes, who's the director down there, he's a Penn professor, and he calls it kind of like the precursor to Ellis Island. We had 1793, the deadliest yellow fever epidemic in any American city. We lost 10% of our people. If we had had the same numbers, let's say for COVID, we would have lost 150,000 in 3 months. That was the impact. But then we had one in 1796, 77, and I think 1798. So finally we said that we have to put in a waterworks because there must be something wrong with the water. And we said we need to put in a quarantine station. So that is what a lazaretto is. It's named after Saint Lazarus, the one who dealt with the lepers. And they initially had it near the airport. It was too easy to get around, so they bought it in Delaware County, and it's, let's say, Dublin Township, I'm trying to think.
Essington?
It's exit 9 of I-95, Essington Township, and there's another name there.
T, with a T.
Yeah, Tinicum Township. And once the lazaretto was built, in the sickly season, which was hot weather, June to about October or November, depending on the first freeze, every ship going up the river had to stop there and be checked. And early on, quite a few of the people were carrying disease. Later on, it was a lot less. But the amazing thing is, Dr. Barnes has looked at the numbers. Even with yellow fever, cholera, and some of the other terrible diseases, 85% of them lived at the lazaretto because they got clean sheets, clean bedding. They had good food, they had rest, and they had great nursing care. And 85% lived, which he was astonished at.
Wow.
And it's certainly worth a visit. It's a marvelous place
And you
to
can
go.
tour there? Do you do tours there?
No, I do not. But there's self-tours you can do there. There's an audio tour that and David Barnes does them every now and then. He's been affiliated with it since about, I think, 2005, and he has a great book out on the lazaretto.
So, you speak about all these dead bodies. I know there's a Potter's Field somewhere on Washington Square, right?
Right. It was mostly that. Well, it was a lot of the blacks had a Potter's Field there, and then you have the Revolutionary War soldiers there,
Right.
and you have a lot of Acadians, which people don't know.
Oh, wow.
In the French and Indian War, which was like 57 to 63, somewhere in there, the English pushed the Acadians out of Nova Scotia, and they dumped 400 in an island in the Delaware River and left them. And the Quakers, Anthony Benezet, a really good guy Quaker, said, well, we can't just leave these people here. He brought them up to near 5th and Pine. There were evidently one-story wooden houses there. But the Acadians said, we're prisoners of war. We're not going to work. We're not going to do anything for our food. Basically, we're just going to sit here and let you take care of us.
Acadian, was that like a group of people from
from Nova Scotia.
Oh, I see.
And it was Acadia, they called it.
Oh, okay.
And so 200 of them died in the yellow fever epidemic, and then eventually the other 200 dwindled down to South Carolina, mostly to New Orleans area. But I never knew there were Acadians here. But there was even a poem called, I just lost the name of it. It was by Henry Wadsworth Longfellow, about the Acadians being pushed in, and in his long poem, the heroine dies in a convent in Philadelphia.
Wow, I mean, these little things that nobody would know. How do you retain it all?
I have to keep reading it all the time. I have to go back and refresh because I'm old and I lose it.
No, so tell me about the tours. You're doing tours now, right, in Philadelphia?
I do tours mostly around the visitor center. I like to show people the President's House, which is very interesting, and also there's a real tale about slavery there because one of Washington's slaves escaped from there and got on what we call the Underground Railroad, not really a railroad, but she got to the port of Philadelphia and went to New Hampshire, and then Washington came after her legally and illegally about 3 or 4 times. Wow. And she finally somehow communicated, if you free me when I die, I'll come back. And he said that's a non-starter, so she didn't come back. And then one other slave who had been here, Hercules, who was a cook in Philadelphia, he cooked for all the diplomats around the world. He escaped when the Washingtons went back to Virginia and they put him in the field. Now he's been cooking for dignitaries, wow, and now he's a field hand. On Washington's birthday, a lot of feasting and drinking. Hercules left. They thought he came to Philly, but he didn't. He ended up with, I think, using his original slave master's name in New York City.
Oh, there's just a million stories. There really are. So I guess I was going to ask you, I segued about like all the different burial plots and all, but in your tours, have you ever had a haunted experience? Like have you experienced anything with all these souls around us in Philadelphia? I have not, but I will tell you that most of the people that I know who have worked or lived in the Powell House, in the Physic House, which is at 3rd, Powell House is at 3rd, Physic at 4th, Carpenter's Hall, Independence Hall, many of them have had ghostly experiences. Yeah, I did a walking haunted tour with my daughter one year for Halloween, and I was feeling a little spooked. I could feel the presence of the energy.
Have you been to Fort Mifflin?
No. Oh yes, I have been there.
The most haunted place in America.
Oh really? Is it? Yeah. You're kidding. Yeah. When she was little, her school went there on a school trip. Right up by the airport?
Yeah, that's where I first found out about the Lazaretto. I was at Fort Mifflin, and they said, of course you know about the Lazaretto, and I said, of course I don't. But Fort Mifflin has people there with cameras all the time because of there are 3 people that are seen by many tourists who come there. They repeat it all over and over. So there's something going on there. Wow.
One time I went to a revolutionary reenactment there to do a story. I was freelancing for the South Philadelphia Review at the time. It was many, many years ago. And I could not believe how the people that enact those historical events live, breathe, and sleep. Yeah. The tradition, the culture, the foods, the way they speak, the vernacular. I mean, it's really, they embody it. By the way, I forgot to tell you, at the Lazaretto, they have a South Philadelphia Italian collection there. Even though the Italians didn't go to the Lazaretto, because they more went to New York. They came into Ellis
but
Island.
They talked to Dr. Barnes, and they have a whole room set up of Italian collections down there.
Oh, I'll have to go check it
Yeah,
out.
it might be a South Philly store.
Yes, exactly. Well, I know Old Swedes Museum, not Gloria Day Church, but the museum down
Right.
at the lakes, Franklin Delano Park, is where all the Italians had their wedding pictures, at least
Oh, really?
my mother's generation.
I didn't know that. Did not know
Yeah,
that.
and they hosted a meatball event one time, and my mom, we participated
Okay,
in it.
interesting.
It was a meatball contest. So wait, tell me about the tours again, Jim. So do people book you, but they go on your website to book you, or is it an orchestrated thing that you have a set time and place?
No,
or you do it on
them,
demand?
I do them when I have time and if there's a demand. I don't like step-on tours, which is bus tours where you just come in and out, and
Right.
because if people don't have a chance to understand what they're seeing.
Right.
So I do only walking tours or walking and step-on, where I have some Polish tours that come in and some Mumbai tours where I'll do a little bit. We'll walk for half an hour, and then we'll go to the Rocky Steps because everybody wants
Let's
to
take
go to the Rocky
pictures.
Steps.
Right.
But I do them mostly around Independence Hall area. I love to go to the Tiffany Mosaic. If you've never been to the Dream Garden Tiffany Mosaic at the Curtis Building, you have to go.
Oh my gosh, I'm getting all these
tips. It's a spectacular artwork. I think there are only 3 that size. It was painted and then made into a mosaic by Louis Comfort Tiffany. And so it's 100,000 pieces of mural. And we almost lost it when Steve Wynn, the gambling magnate, he bought it from an estate and was going to ship it to Las Vegas. And people here went berserk and said, no, now it will never leave Philadelphia.
Even that story. It's like things that are so you wouldn't even expect that you know. And that leads me to another question. Is there anything that has like really blown your mind? Like of all the knowledge you have and everything you've learned, is there anything that you were like, really just knocked you on?
There's one. I love to take people to the tomb or talk about Gustavus Cunningham. He's in St. Peter's Churchyard. And I think he was probably a crazy, but he was our crazy.
We love our own crazy.
He started out as a privateer, which was basically a pirate that had a letter that said they were allowed to do it. And everybody needed privateers because we needed gunpowder and we couldn't get it on our own. We weren't allowed to make it, so we had to go steal it, basically. Gustavus was,
wait, give me the era.
around 1770, during the Revolution.
Okay.
We had about a quarter of all the privateers in the country were in Philadelphia. Gustavus Cunningham was a privateer who came to the attention of Franklin, and he was over at Dunkirk, and he was given papers, and he immediately captured 2 English ships, and the English complained about him, and the French took his paperwork. So he couldn't get on the ship again, or he couldn't captain a ship. So they put him, and the first ship I think was the second ship he called the Revenge. Once the ship left port, he became captain, and he became the pirate of Dunkirk. He captured 64 ships, 4 of them in one day. Wow. Now most of these were commercial vessels, but he would go up against anybody. Finally, the British had 4 warships that were out in the London area just to go against him. And their insurance rates went up 35 or 36% because of Cunningham. They eventually captured him, and the King George said, I will personally hang him. And Washington said, I have 5 of yours, I'll hang them. In the meantime, Cunningham escaped. He got back to Philadelphia, and he went to Congress, and he said, I'd like to be paid for all the things that I did. And Congress said, we don't have any paperwork on you. And he tried to get word to Franklin and couldn't get to him. In 1908, someone was buying a, what's the big signature on the Declaration? The
Hancock?
A Hancock. They were buying a Hancock signature, and it turned out to be the commission papers for Gustavus Cunningham. They just showed up about 100
this was years after he
too
was
late.
gone.
Yes,
yeah.
but they did show that he had been a captain in the United States Navy.
Wow, and with that kind of Chutzpah. He could have been an Eagles fan for sure.
Oh, he would have
if he was
been.
around in more modern times. So, okay, so where if people want to go find out more, because we could talk for hours, honestly. There's so many fascinating things. I have a million more questions for you, but good thing I have your phone number so I can call and ask you when I have questions. But last wrap up is, are you planning on a second book?
I'm not sure. I'm relatively old now. I might take a number of the blogs I've done and try to put them in a book, because the initial book were stories that ran in the Society Hill Reporter and the Queen Village Neighbors Association magazine. And that's why they're short and why I tell people it's a bathroom book. None of the stories is more than 4 pages, but I took this much material and I pushed it down to that. So there's a lot of detail in those 4 pages.
I'll look forward to that, but before I let you go, I want you to do your mnemonic of the streets of Philadelphia, and then I'll put all the information for how to get in touch with Jim or visit his website or get his book in the description. So go ahead.
My mother taught me this when I was about 14, and these are streets running south of Market. I went to Market to buy some chestnuts, changed my mind and bought some walnuts. Chased by a locust, I ran from Spruce to Pine into a lumber yard. South of it, standing on a bridge over the water, was a girl named Catherine. She was a Christian and her father was a carpenter in the Washington and Federal Army. And I use that every day, because if I'm lost or I don't know where I am, I see the street and I go, okay, I'm at Catherine Street, now I know where I am.
Those things work not only in school for memory, but they work in advertising art industry as well, right? To remember something that is audio articulate.
Yep.
Well, I'm so appreciative of you coming down,
Thank
Jim.
you.
It was great to see you, and I hope to see more of you and maybe take a tour.
Come down, a professional courtesy tour.
All right,
anytime.
that sounds good. I'm going to take you up on it.
Do that.
Thank you so much for tuning in, and we'll see you next time.